I was at the clergy laity conference this past week, and so it's a gathering of all of the priests, the hierarchs, the bishops, and the faithful of our parishes throughout the country to talk about the current needs of our church, our archdiocese, to approve the archdiocese budget. So it's kind of the governing, one of the main governing bodies of the archdiocese that gathered with representatives from all the parishes. One of the things they have while you're there, like many conferences, is they'll have a lot of different workshops and classes that you can attend around a whole variety of topics. I attended one that was about artificial intelligence, personhood, and theosis, and which I wish they had, the people that were sharing were definitely like very well educated in their fields, but I don't know that it all came together. And there was another talk, another workshop about evangelism and creating a missions-minded parish, and which is very good. But one of the talks that I attended was actually on clergy burnout and the signs of when someone is becoming burned out, and then also what do you do? Like if, and so the priest that was sharing had actually gone through this experience, and so he was talking about what happened to him and then how he recovered. It was a very nice talk. It was a really good presentation. But there was something that happened during the presentation that really stood out to me, because he presented from his own experience, and then also he actually went back to school and started studying these things because he wanted to understand what was happening to him. I think he had never experienced real depression before, and so it was kind of a shock. He really didn't understand what was happening. Whereas when I was listening to him talk, I was thinking, well, that's kind of that can be like my baseline, you know? That's the norm throughout my life. And, so it's, different people. But he shared about this, and there was something that happened that really stood out to me. Because I think the emphasis of what he was saying related to clergy is that when they're really struggling, they need to kind of turn towards people in their life, like their spouse or their family, or the people that are close to them, and really seek communion and seek to kind of, be open about their weaknesses and the areas where they're struggling, and kind of seek support. But then there was a comment that was made in response to that type of notion, that was coming from a perspective of like celibacy, which many of the clergy in our archdiocese are. They may be monks or archimandrites or hierarchs. And so this comment in response was basically saying, well, what you really need to do, like if you clergy are struggling, is go to Mount Athos, for a week or even for a month or something like that, and like try to find yourself and all this other stuff. And then that it made me think about a lot of things, but about how often we may, as like a married clergyman, or you in the church that are married, or that are hoping to get married, or that are living your life and you're young and you're going to go to college and all this other stuff, you might look to celibate monastics, or you might look to writings by solitaries, such as St. Theophan the Recluse, or St. Isaac of Syria, or St. John of the Ladder, and read these things and think that they're giving you advice that is absolutely applicable in your situation. And what this talk with what was being shared about burnout and the struggles that people face, it just really nailed it home for me that you're probably wrong about that. About thinking that you're going to find the best kind of advice from a solitary when you happen to be a married man. You're probably looking in the wrong place. And I don't mean to say that there aren't things that are valuable there, because there are. There's things in St. Isaac and St. John of the Ladder and in these ascetic fathers that absolutely are like, it's like when you read them, you feel a fountain of life rising up in your soul. It's beautiful things. They're things that are full of mystery and wonder, worship, reverence, awe before God, all of those things. But I want you to think of what St. John the Ladder actually says in his book, The Ladder of Divine Ascent, when people come to him and they ask, well, you monastics are doing all this stuff, what are we to do? How are we supposed to live? And you know what he says? He basically says, keep the fasts, go to confession, go to church. That's it. So I want you to think about that. That's what St. John of the Ladder actually says to people. So he doesn't necessarily presume to step out of his lane and offer advice that's not necessarily going to be helpful. And what I saw happening kind of in this moment, because there was that comment that was made about, well, just go to Mount Athos. That'll solve all your problems. And it's like, but if a clergyman or if any one of us feels that he is distant from his family, that he is distant from his spouse, that he is struggling and feels isolated, and so that's the advice that you give, is to go and be more isolated. Think about that. Think about this discordance that's going on there about what's being recommended. And so I'm saying this because I can see it in myself. So for instance, there's a tendency as you study ascetical literature, because you're dealing with your thoughts and you're struggling with your thoughts. And you become adept at identifying when you have a bad thought. And so what do? You immediately shut it down, which is often what you have to do. You can't be following all of your negative thoughts or all of your tempting thoughts, and you wouldn't want to, because they're going to lead you to terrible places. The problem is not so much that, it's the tendency to do that entirely on your own and not actually let anybody else see that you're struggling with these things. You don't actually open up to the people closest to you that you should be open with, to your spouse or to your and especially when they're older, like even your children or your friends, and you just do it all internally, because that's kind of what you're learning from reading these literature that's written by solitaries. And because of that, even though you're trying to follow this path of virtue, the virtue of having good relationships and a strong marriage starts to wane, because you're all stuck in your own head all the time and you're not actually communing with other people. And so you have to think, remember the place that you are in life and what God has called you to. Remember that. Remember that, and I always tell, it's my own private opinion that there aren't very many vocations that we can actually have in life. Like, I don't really view a career as a vocation, a calling or something like that. I think you could work anywhere. Well, anywhere that wasn't sinful. I think you could work anywhere. And I don't really view those things as vocations. You want to know why? Because eventually they end. You retire from those things. You actually give them up. So there's only a handful of genuine vocations. One of them would be the priesthood. Another would be marriage. Another would be being a father, or being a mother, and being a brother, and being a sister. And of course, the ultimate one of just being a Christian, being a follower of Christ. So there's only a handful of things that you can actually describe in your life as a vocation. But if you have any one of those things in your life, they are what require like genuine attention and care. And anything, even if it's advice from someone who appears holy or who is holy, and maybe you're misinterpreting what they're saying, even if it's that and it's leading you away from those primary vocations that you've received from God, it's not leading you in the right path. And so that was something that I thought about while we were at the conference this week. So God bless you.